Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe Digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Welcome. Welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. In Mississippi, a state that Martin Luther King said was sweltering with injustices, a state that I've lived in most of my life, a place that I call my home. My ancestors lived here. Sometimes I take a trip up to the cemetery just to go back in history, back in time, and see and talk to the people that have endured, survived, and gone on to glory. Sometimes it's good to have a conversation in the middle of the cemetery. You can get some real answers there. And sometimes you need to do that at night. You need to go out there around 12 o'clock at night and just talk to your ancestors and see what they say to you. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and family and send us some stars. If you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to subscribe to the program. It would help a lot. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, we want you to hit the donate button. That's our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. It's the same format that you see on CNN, on Netflix, and on Showtime. Absolutely the same technology. The only thing that's different is the people that own and operate this studio and the content that we provide. We do more in-depth coverage of the things that matter the most to African Americans. And we do that because the history has been distorted so much until we no longer know where we come from, and we certainly don't know where we're going. Mississippi remains last in every major category that's meaningful, and yet this state has a greater than 40% African American population. We live in a city of Jackson, which happens to be the capital city of the state of Mississippi, and Jackson is greater than 85% African Americans. But there's some trouble in the land. There's some rats in the wood piles. Because you see, even though we have this great number of African Americans throughout the state, we're dead last. We're the poorest state in the nation. Dead last. We're the most unhealthiest state in the nation and don't even think about economics. Poverty rings high in Mississippi. Greater than 25% of the residents of the city of Jackson live in poverty. If you move up to the 2nd Congressional District, greater than 40% of the population lives in poverty. And the days when we had plenty of food and plenty activities are gone. The days when we had our own land, and our own wagons, and our own mules, and our own dreams and aspirations are gone. We're living at a different time now. We're living at a time now where we see a lot of individuals that have given up hope. And when one does not care about their own life, then they have no value on yours at all. So in Mississippi, particularly in Jackson, 2 years ago, we were the murder capital of the world. In Mississippi, we have the highest number of African Americans incarcerated than any other place in the world. You see, things are bad. But I'm here to tell you that things are getting worse. You might not can believe it because there is not a second bottom, not like the water table where you got the second water table. I didn't know we could fall any further. But yet we're making strides to do that. The Mississippi legislature has introduced bills that completely usurp the power and the authority and the democratic principles from African Americans in this great city. They've introduced legislation that says that they will install their own police department right inside of Jackson, Mississippi, and that the police chief would report directly to the Department of Public Safety, and the commissioner of the Department of Public Safety reports directly to the governor. That's bad. But that's not bad enough. The bill also says that they will install judges that will hear all of the cases that are brought before them by the Capitol Police. They're going to have their own judges. And that's not bad enough. They're going to have their own prosecutors. We're not going through the district attorney of the Hinds County, the way things have always been done, traditionally been done that way for over 200 years. Now, you got new people. You got white people that are presiding over the fate of African Americans, and they're all appointed by the governor. So we got some issues here that we got to deal with. Back in my day as a boy, I could see the Klan riding through the community, but at least they had on hoods. In Mississippi today, this kind of legislation reminds you of the fact that we don't care what you think. We'll do whatever we want to do. And you have absolutely no power, nor do you have the ability to do anything about it. And so times have changed, and we find ourselves without great leadership in our race today. I go back and study the lives of Du Bois and Booker T. Washington and Du Bois again, and Marcus Garvey studied again, and Reginald Lewis, I studied that again, and they were giants in their fields. And we know we had Martin and Medgar and Vernon Damon and Fannie Lou. We know we had Ralph Brown and Malcolm X. We know we had James Brown and Stokely Carmichael, individuals that were standing up for what's right and how African Americans ought to be treated against perilous forces led by J. Edgar Hoover and his gang of bandits. But now we have no leaders. The top 10% of the African Americans, you recall that Booker T. Washington, that Du Bois said that if you will give me the top 10%, the talented 10%, that's all he needed to make a change. Our top 10%, our talented 10%, has moved out of the city of Jackson. They have vacated the land and moved into the suburbs and merged in around those that are bringing this demeaning legislation back into the places that they left. And so I don't know exactly what tomorrow brings, but I see trouble. I see a city that's poised and a city that's volatile. I see a city that's hemorrhaging for the lack of economics, starvation by the state government on many of the resources that it needs, and void of effective leadership. So I don't know exactly where this is headed, but it's going to be a rough ride. We need to buckle up. Now, as always, my co-host, the distinguished gentleman, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, is here in the studio with me. Dr. Henderson is a man amongst men, an individual that was born on a plantation in the Mississippi Delta. And yet he sits here next to me now as Dr. Eldridge Henderson from a plantation. Think about the gap. Think about the distance that he had to travel, and the odds that he had to overcome to achieve the position that he enjoys today. Booker T said it's not the heights that you obtain, but it's the depths from which you came. I often said if Dr. Henderson had been born in Massachusetts, in Stanford, that he would have been president of the United States of America because of the talents and the gifts that he possesses. But he wasn't born there. He was born in the Delta on a plantation. So it's good that he stayed out of prison, didn't get lynched, didn't get beat up. Too bad. He might have taken a whipping or two in his day. Dr. Henderson,
yes,
it's
sir.
Good to have you in the studio. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, sir, and I appreciate those wonderful remarks you made about my early childhood. It was a very informative period. And you said some things about Mississippi that made me believe that you have some doubts about the future, Mr. Socrates. But I want to tell you now, you need to just think about the fact that this is nothing new. If you look at the history of Mississippi, the South, and the nation, black folks in this country, and I have records to show that they had semi-freedom only about 9 years in the history of black people being in this country from the late 1500s to today. About 9 years where they had a semblance of real power. And that was during the time of Reconstruction. And our records show that we put that period about 1868 to about 1877. That's when you had blacks in semi-positions of responsibility in all areas of state government in the South. Very few in the North now, only 8 years. And that's when they passed all of those bills that alleged to give blacks equity and equality in education, politics, economic development, and leadership. That lasted 9 years. Prior to that period, 450 years, it was just as is beginning to be the day, no black leadership. After 1877, the Klan, the people that you used to see riding around in hoods and so forth, and other white patrols, were rounding up blacks, putting them on plantations, putting them in prison, taking their little rights they had, and some cities and counties just openly expelled blacks and lynched a few. And one, if you look at the history, and we just reviewed it yesterday, the history of Clinton, Mississippi, around the late 1890s. They rounded up their black politicians and lynched one and told the others to get out of town. So now if you go to Clinton, Mississippi right now, you won't find what they allege to be a black district because they have not recovered yet. That's not even as bad as what happened in some of the other places, north, south, east, and west. Black people were openly massacred, shot, forced to commit suicide, forced to leave their real mind and go crazy because of economic deprivation. And many had to leave at night, headed to safe territories, and many went to Canada. And here we are going through the same thing again, and I've been teaching this for years, that if you don't control what you have where you are in the majority, and have your own defense force, your own judges, your own lawyers, your own economic development specialists, and pool those resources and make compacts with the people in your community where you're in the majority, you can almost withstand anything. But if the people do what you just said, the talented 10th leave the area, you won't have anything but I call planned hostilities for the next 100 years. See, we go through cycles, 100 years of poverty, a few years of redress to cool things down, while the same enemies of mankind plan to take over again, and they have to have the cooperation of that talented 10th to work with them. Now, if you look at the legislature in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and many other areas where you have a good number of blacks, you're going to find, and we have researched this, that a certain number of those work with and vote with the opponents, which most people call the Republicans. The Republicans control the South. The Democrats control other areas of the nation. And the only difference in a Democrat and a Republican is the way you spell the name. So I can assure you that prayer is not going to help. Only thing that would help black folks in America and the world is where they're in the majority, they must control from birth to death 5 areas of activity: education and training, politics, religion, leadership, and economic development. They have to get their own leaders and expel, just like the Klan sympathizers today are, expel the leaders that are in positions of responsibility that are getting paid, Mr. Socrates, to get aside or step aside or just go and have a referendum and vote them out of office or have a vote of no confidence and then start where you are, pool your resources, create your own leaders, and then take over the economic situation, take over the churches, take over the community organizations, and build, expand. But one ingredient that you must have, Mr. Socrates, to get you some relief mentally and so forth, is your own community association where you defend yourselves. You have to have a strong legal team. You have to have personal warriors that's prepared to defend you from the outside agitators, physically defend you, like they had in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and others. They call them many different names: community resistance teams, deacons of defense, the Black Panther Party, on and on and on. And those people got respect until the government figured out a way to silence those people. And they are going to do the same thing in just a few years. They're going to start silencing people by criticizing them, framing them, and showing the people and the public, including the blacks, that there are certain blacks that are not in a position to be respected. And they're going to condemn them to the point where in just a few years, then they'll be able to kill those folks. And that's the trend in America, and that's the trend in the history of the world, because when the dictators and the Tartarians and other agitators that want to control the economics and the politics in the community, when they are in power, they try to keep it, and they will kill their mother to stay in power and disregard other humans.
Dr. Henderson, you and I are educated men, and we see the condition of African Americans here in the world today, not only in Mississippi, but throughout the entire country. And what we see is not good. And why is the African American reviewed with such disdain? I mean, is it the curse of Ham? I mean, what happened here for us to earn this much hatred?
Well, sir, Ham has nothing to do with it. I hear that old story all the time about Ham. We're in our situation, Mr. Socrates, realistically speaking, is because we have always loved our enemies.
Oh.
We have always said that our enemy can punish us whenever they choose And that's been supported by our leaders, starting in the white church. And then they gave the leadership to the black preachers that they appointed and taught what to say and brainwashed at least 4 generations of blacks to believe that propaganda. So we are trained to take any kind of abuse, day or night, and knowing that people are coming to burn your house down or you won't even defend yourself. That kind of thing.
So you don't agree with the philosophy of Gandhi and Martin Luther King?
Never did. Never did. That's why I lost my first job, because of my disagreement with Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Gandhi's principle of self-hate. Self-hate is when you know you are in the right and you vow that you're going to let others come and kill you on the spot or beat your head to death and put you in prison, and all you're going to do is hold up your hands and pray or be taught to shield yourself so they won't beat your brains out. I lost my first job because I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't succumb to the principles of nonviolence.
That's right, and I didn't keep the job because my job was to tell others to do the same thing, and I wouldn't do it.
We're getting ready to go to a station ID. We want you to stay with us. We're going to be right back after this message. Stay tuned.
SocratesGarrettENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. SocratesGarrettENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. You know, we believe digital broadcast studio brings you the kind of content that you won't find anywhere else. Quite frank conversation, dealing with the real issues and telling it like it really is. We're not sugarcoating it. We live in Mississippi. We love Mississippi. We want to see it better, but there's some problems. And we got to put those problems on the table. We got to deal with the issues as they arise. And so we're not being negative, but we're trying to say that this is a problem. Let's solve it. If we solve this problem, then maybe we can move this state forward. Now, Dr. Henderson and I both grew up in Mississippi as young black males, and so we know many stories, many tragic events that we're not sharing on this program and not discussing over this air. But you know, the deal is inside of you, though every time you saw the Klan, it put a mark inside of your being. Every time you saw your mother get slapped or your daddy get beat down or the taking of your cows and your cattle from your farm, inside of you that said that whenever I grow up, when I become a man, that I'm not going to say yes, sir, and no, sir, that I'm not going to do that. And I used to ask my daddy when he ran his sawmill and he was forced to say yes, sir, to white folk that were buying lumber. And I asked him, I said, well, Daddy, why did you say yes, sir, to that man? He's younger than you. And he said, well, I tried to put 10 cents extra on the price of lumber for that. I said, okay, that's your logic. I mean, you fight back any way that you can. He knew that he could not stand up and not say yes, sir, or no, sir. So he tried to fight back in a way that he could by putting 10 cents extra on the price of a 2x4. And blacks got to fight back any way they can. But many of us are moving like sheep to slaughter. It's like we're in Jonestown, like we have drank the Kool-Aid, that we won't stand up and won't defend ourselves. Our legislature, our delegations, our elected officials, our organizations are not vocal the way they were in the early days. I very seldom hear from the NAACP in Jackson, Mississippi. I very seldom hear from them. I don't know where SCLC is. I don't know if it's still in operation or not. And you see, and so we're leaderless, and we don't have organizations to rally our people. And so when the people don't have leaders, what will they do? What will they resort to? What happened to the children that were led out of Egypt by Moses? What happened to them when Moses went up in the mountains? What did they do when they didn't have a leader? They did the same thing that they're doing now. They were drinking, adultering, beating up one another, worshiping false gods, acting crazy, all because they didn't have a leader. So here in Jackson, Mississippi, we have the same scenario. What are we doing? What are we doing? We're taking our frustration out on one another because we don't have an organized effort to say this is our problem, this is our enemy, this is the things we ought to come together and fight against. We fight one another. We turn on each other at an alarming rate, more so than I've ever seen before. And so something has got to give. We're going to find ourselves in a position that Dr. Henderson always says that we got less than 7 years to change this thing, or we're no longer going to exist. Dr. Henderson.
Yes, sir.
Share a little bit with us what you see the condition of the African-American race is and where you predict it'll be in 10 years.
Well, I predict it's going to be where I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. It's going to be in 7 years.
Oh.
We don't have until about January the 31st, 2029 to get this thing together and get ourselves in leadership positions, ladies and gentlemen. The idea is that if you don't control the means of production, distribution, and exchange in your area or in your community, you are not going to be able to survive as an independent entity. You are not going to be dependent on others for your survival and get what you call real justice and democracy. Those things don't go together. The one that is making the rules, telling you from birth to death what you can do and can't do, will assure you that they're going to keep you in a dependent position where you're looking for the goods and services they have, and they're going to be inferior. So in order to make this happen, where you will be in a position of responsibility and leadership, black people worldwide, wherever they in the majority, going to have to start building their own and financing their own financial institutions. They're going to have to start building and securing and maintaining more businesses. They must create independent school systems that are not associated with the public school. And if you do anything with the public school, they do it through a memorandum of understanding where they go and let their students take advantage of some of the opportunities at the school that they don't want to spend money on, big ticket items like football and basketball and other things that the school has public monies for. But you don't want to be included in it on a regular basis. So the education has to be taken over by church and the community organizations with their own teachers, with their own trainees. And you got to understand, one does not have to be certified to be a teacher if they know the subject and know the skill level that they need, because it is clear now that one can live at home, enroll in almost any class anywhere in the world, and get all kind of degrees, certificates, diplomas, and other credentials without leaving the house. But if the church would take this over and get the people that they need to teach these people and let each one teach one, for instance, the kindergarten students can teach 4 or 5 of their peers. It's very simple. You get the smartest students in the class and let them teach 2 or 3 of them. They can do it in all subjects. The church and religious denominations can start on the local level in the churches with memberships on a denominational basis, these churches, and they had the money to do it and the facilities. They can pool their resources and have pre-K through graduate schools, their own medical centers. They did have them for a while in various states in the black communities, their own golf centers, their own malls, strip malls, their universities in different areas of responsibility, international affairs, where they train their own lawyers, their own teachers, their own entrepreneurs right on the spot, and do it in short term. To give you an example, you can attend a college or university now and study how to start a business, how to get the certifications you need, and how to write grants and put financial projects together. It'll take a whole semester to do it. But if the black church would get this and get a team together that know the law, know taxation, and know leadership principles, instead of teaching somebody 5 months or a semester how to do what I just said, you can teach it in 5 weeks. And then when one has that skill level where he is taught how to start, manage, and develop a business and manage the production, distribution, exchange, and marketing in their areas, and learn how to negotiate and form connections with others in other communities and other nations, the people then that are depressed, that are taking care of their own selves, they're taking care of themselves, they will then get more respect from others. Because if you've been going to the bank and you couldn't get money to have your business, start your own bank, and black people throughout the world had the money to do it. For instance, the churches throughout Mississippi and the nation in 30 days can have a bank operating, because you can get a bank incorporated in 2 or 3 hours on paper on the local level. There are some state documents you have to fill out, and there are some national documents, but you can start small. Hope Credit Union is an example. And now they are in charge of millions of dollars, and they started small. They started many banks and financial institutions on the local level in the black communities when they were excluded from the bank. You had blacks starting insurance companies. They had their own hotels. During my time, when you couldn't go to a so-called white hotel, they had 4 or 5 black ones in Jackson, Mississippi. 3 or 4 black theaters in Jackson. And with the leadership we have now, and in the past 15 or 20 years, you have not one black theater. The churches now are not doing very much, because most of the churches now are Facebook and YouTube churches. So they have not taken the responsibility that's given to them according to the principles and doctrines in the Bible that say what elders and preachers and teachers are supposed to do. They have gotten away from that, and they're making these churches social organizations instead of organizations that's designed to help the members move from where they are to where they need to be. And that's why they're on earth, not teach them to prepare to suffer and live in hell on earth and then die and go to hell. You're supposed to teach your members in these churches how to live in heaven on earth, teach them the principles, teach them how to contract with each other so they can have monies, incomes, good health, and self-respect. That means they'll live longer and they'll die in their sleep in old age in most cases.
So you are of the opinion that the church is a critical piece of the puzzle to move us to a better position.
It happened during Reconstruction right after slavery and up until the 1960s.
It may have, but I'm of the opinion that religion in itself has kept us in a position where we turn the other cheek and that we don't live for today, that we strive to go to heaven as opposed to going to work. And I believe even when Jesus came, he said, somebody got to go to work. Everybody can't be praying in the temple all day.
That's right. And he proved it by cleaning up the temple. When he went and talked to the people, he fed them first so he can get their attention and told them, and I'm just going to summarize, basically, that there are certain things they need to do. And to give a short summary is to love yourself first. Love the Lord. Take care of your family. Work hard, work smart, and you'll be able to live in heaven on earth. I never worried about going to heaven when I die. That is not my job.
Well, you plan to go to heaven, I assume?
No, I don't plan to go. I'm going to live in heaven on earth up to my ability to do so, and I have nothing to do with what's going to happen when I die. That is for the man or the God or whatever created man to worry about. I don't worry about that. And as long as you worry about going to heaven while you're alive and you're living in hell, everybody taking advantage of you and you're alive in it because you think if I turn my other cheek, I'll be saved. When you turn your other cheek, the enemy going to hit you on the other side. So our people got to learn. You got to think. You got to learn. You have to earn. You have to save. Our black people got to learn to invest. And then when they have that residual income coming, Mr. Socrates, they can get involved in community affairs. You cannot be broke and be a good politician and a good preacher. I'm telling you, you just can't do that.
Well, Doc, let me ask you this. Mississippi has the highest number of elected officials in the country. And yet we're last. And we're last in populations where blacks control. How do you reconcile that?
Oh, that's very simple. That's historical.
What do you mean?
We always had, in many states in the early days during the colonial period, had black majority towns and colonies. They didn't have the political power at the time, but during Reconstruction, when blacks had power, they did a lot of things for those 9 years, economically.
I thought we were growing in that period.
We were until after 1877. And then the South and the North got together, took the federal troops out of the southern areas. They gave reparations to the white plantation owners for their slaves and their property and the plantations they took from them. And they say, we are going to turn you all loose on these black folks, and you do whatever you want because we don't have time to mess with you anymore. And they pulled those soldiers out. They went back to the north, east, and west, and they had some black soldiers. They sent them out there to play around with the Indians that they had put on the reservation. So they had the whole nation then. They didn't have to worry about the blacks. They were recaptured and put back in slavery through the plantations. I'm a living example of that. The Indians were gone. They didn't have to worry with the Indians other than a few mulattoized Indians, as they call members of the civilized tribe. And their mothers and fathers were white, and they made them pass for white. And some were even officers in the Confederate. So that is the story, the real story of blacks in the South and the world.
Well, Doc, we come from such a proud legacy. And this is Black History Month. And I'm going back and looking at all of the figures and all of the wonderful things that African Americans accomplished. I'm looking at where civilization began. I'm looking at all of the things that African Americans have been a part of. We have great legacy, a great history. We don't even know our history because, one, you can't teach it in Mississippi. They passed a law that says you can't teach the critical race theory in Mississippi.
Well, that's nothing but something that one would think about if they are a coward or they're afraid to do it. Just because something is written as a codified ordinance doesn't mean you can't do it. You go and practice what we call legal law and social law, things that's best for you, whether it's written or not.
Well, we don't have that kind of courageous people anymore. Take this point, an example. This House Bill 1020 that I talked about earlier in the show, that's an absolutely slap in the face. It's a stifling legislative effort to take control of Jackson and disenfranchise blacks. I noticed in the paper last night on your show that the back page of the Jackson Advocate newspaper was a ad from Tougaloo College that said that they opposed House Bill 1020. But Doc, I didn't see anything from Jackson State and Mississippi Valley and Alcorn State University.
And let's say Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Delta State, you see anything?
No, but those are predominantly white.
That's exactly what I'm
Individual
they all work together. And you got to understand, Mr. Socrates, and I've been telling you and others for years, the black universities and colleges don't have a say-so about the destiny of the areas that they control, figuratively. Those people are appointed as caretakers, the presidents, the provosts, the county superintendents, the county school boards. They are given their marching orders from the State Department of Education. The college and universities get their marching orders from the IHL, the Institution of Higher Learning.
Well, why would any black man of substance want to be a caretaker?
Who would want to be a caretaker when you are called the president, the dean, the provost, and you are making $2.50 more than anyone on your campus except the football coach? Man, that's a prestigious position. You know you don't have anything to worry about. When you get your marching orders, they are usually on 3 pages that the president's supposed to do. And if you do those things and don't ask for too much money, and you better not protest when you see something that's discriminatory that's happening in your school or university, you're supposed to call your boss and say, this is happening at my school, boss. What do you think we need to do about it? You don't give a proposal in writing. If you do, your job is gone. Overnight, they'll find something about you, and you'll be gone the next day. Or they'll set up you in some way, and you'll be gone before the next day. Matter of fact, when school starts, the next day, you have already resigned.
Look at you. We're talking with Dr. Eldridge Henderson, and he's painting a picture that I don't like. The brightest of us have been portrayed as caretakers, carrying out the wishes and the plans and the objectives of the oppressor. Now, we're up against a station break, but we want you to stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Are you dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, ground zero. We're broadcasting here in an African-American owned and operated studio. We've been seen all over the world. We've been seen by the Palestinians and by the Israelis. We've been seen all over the world. And many times we get a chance to interview individuals that have come to this country wanting to know how was the African experience. What was it like being black in Mississippi in 1948? What was it like? How did you navigate? How did you survive? Well, let me just share with you, many times our parents survived by hiding out. They hid out in the swamps and lands where no man has ever traveled. We still have some areas in Mississippi that no human has ever gone. And Mississippi is full of streams and rivers and swampland that just uninhabitable. And so they hid out down there. It was back in the time when African Americans and Indians, this was the Choctaw Nation long before it was controlled by Europeans and long before it became a part of a great migration for African Americans. Choctaws ruled Mississippi, and today you can't find a handful of Choctaws anywhere. If you go up to Philadelphia, Mississippi, you will find the little hotels up there, Golden Moon, run by the Choctaws, and they're kept on the little reservation. Now, reservations come in all forms. For them, they had a designated boundaries where they couldn't go outside of. Well, in Jackson, Mississippi, the city that has got 85% of its population is African American. We're in the little urban area called South Jackson. And we're surrounded there by not barbed wire fences, but we have interstate bypasses that circle our area. And so it's becoming more and more clear and more evident that African Americans are being pushed towards some type of a resort, some type of a plantation, some type of a designated area that we want African Americans to be in. And why do I say that so emphatically? It's because we know that as whites began to migrate back into the city of Jackson, that the ability for African Americans to live in those areas, we won't have the ability. We call that gentrification. And so blacks will have to move out again. Now, don't take my word for it. Blacks, people, especially those in Mississippi. I was born in Madison County, Mississippi. And Madison County, especially on the east side, was a poor county, but it was 80% African Americans. Now the richest county in Mississippi is Madison County, and all of the wealth is contained right here in the southern part of Madison County, where the schools are magnificent, the highways are beautiful. Our Mayor Hawkins Butler, has done an excellent job managing the city of Madison up there, and she has decorated bridges that overpass the interstate. In the black part of Jackson, Mississippi, we have bridges that have been out for more than 10 years. We have communities that have been cut completely off. You don't have access to it. We had a street that drove right by Grove Park Golf Course, and if you know anything about Mississippi, you know the Grove Park was the park that was African Americans had control over. Pete Brown played golf at Grove Park. Blacks couldn't play anywhere else. And Pete Brown went on to play on the tour. And so blacks have always been pushed into an area. But now we don't have the ability to feed ourselves because we don't have no farms and no gardens and no cattle. We don't have the ability to defend ourselves. We don't have any shotguns, and we don't have any mountains and large trees to hide behind. And so we're completely, totally vulnerable to whomever wants to take advantage of our condition. And my guest, Dr. Henderson, knows a little bit about this, having been born on a plantation on the Mississippi Delta. He knows a little bit about people taking advantage of black folks back in the day. And I'm going to ask him to compare that to today. Doc, I guess you had the country store that a black man could never get out of debt when you came up on the in the Delta.
That's right. Let me tell you something. Now, this is a historical fact. A lot of those black people loved that store so much. And I'm telling you now, I'm still alive, you see, and I'm talking about it. I was there. Every time they didn't have to work, they would leave home and go and sit around that store and talk among themselves. They're doing the same thing today. In that same community, they don't have the plantation store as we speak, but now it is a civilized department area where they have the same thing plus about 10,000 other products in what we call now the plantation store. The black folks now go and sit around the convenience stores in the area, drinking coffee, playing checkers, until they kick them out. Then they love those areas so until now they used to sit, and they're still doing it, sit out there on the bench and play checkers and drink coffee and beer and stuff. Then they told them you got to take these benches out, and now they sit in their trucks and cars and talk and drink and do the same thing instead of going right down the street, building their own little shack where they can have some cokes and play cards and checkers and talk about good things. I'm talking about the old guys that worked on the plantations that are retired, that's still living on the plantation. And that's why I don't allow my dad to go to that place. I tell him don't even go to the convenience store and buy gas if he's on empty. Just call me and I'll buy some gas somewhere and bring it to him. Don't hang around there. Pass it. Go to the post office and go back home. That's what I teach my folks. Because when you start promoting habits and your sons and daughters and nephews and nieces see you doing that, they're going to do the same thing. So there's no change. There's no difference. And if you think there's going to be a change, you got to look at what has happened today, where if they can't outvote you on the local level, they're going to take it because the same people that you mentioned not going to fight against it. The college and black universities not going to fight against it. The white universities and colleges not going to fight against it. The white churches are not going to put an ad in the paper talking against it. The white business people are not going to say anything about it because they are working with the very legislative people that making these laws. They belong to the white businesses. They're on the advisory board for the churches. They're teaching Sunday school. A lot of them wives and nieces working in the school system, public school system, in the private school system. So they're not going to fight against it because they already told them, you all be quiet and we're going to get you some public money for your private schools and you will never have to worry about going back with them blacks. Say, we'll let a few blacks come into our private schools if they are good basketball or football players, and if we can find one that's excellent in soccer, we might give him and her a little scholarship, a partial scholarship. And then the poor folks can get with their other relatives, and all of them, grandmama and cousin and Aunt John, pay the rest of the tuition. We ain't gonna give them no full scholarship. That's to keep you segregated and give you that bone where you say, I'm special. My son or daughter's at private school. And just 15 years ago, they wouldn't even let them be a janitor over there. They couldn't work in the cafeteria. But when they passed all that federal legislation and say education institutions and businesses can get money if they integrate, I know for a fact they had certain black people going around in the community telling black people, I can get you a scholarship at the private school if you want one. I've been contacted to see if you want your son to go. He's a good basketball player. He's a good football player. That happened to some of my relatives. And they were given a chance to go to these private academies.
Well, Doc,
I mean, it just here recently is happening. You don't hear anybody talking about it.
well, Doc, there are a couple words that come to my mind that I need some help with.
What is that?
One is supremacy. I need to know what that means.
Simple.
And the other one is
what?
sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
I mean, help me understand
they
these
are
words.
both cousins. Matter of fact, they're brothers. Supremacy means even if you're lower than a snake, you got to tell yourself and make yourself feel that you are better than the roach. You have to teach that to your wife, your children. You have to teach it in your church that I'm better than the roach. And that roach is always the one that's eating off the snake, pulling the insects off it, and so forth. You teach that for generations, and you then are in a position where you're sovereign, where you have all the power, the economic power, the religious power, the leadership power. You control the money, the military, and the courts, and you can get anything you want, because if you don't like what's going on, you pass a law and make it illegal and just take it over, because you got other people interconnected with you, and they're not going to say a thing until you come for them.
So supremacy means that you are superior to anyone else.
Yeah, and you teach that to yourself. You're really not, and you know you're not.
But
you teach that because you know if you had that person that you say you're supreme over, if you give him or her 1/2 of the chances and opportunities you have, they'll supersede you every time because they're thirsty, they're hungry. They're just waiting for an opportunity to run faster. They catch up with you and then beat you to the finish line because they're going to start behind.
And so in sovereignty, just recently, Biden shot down the object that was supposedly from China.
Of course,
because we violated Americans' sovereignty.
Sir, after he got permission to do it.
After who got permission from whom?
You know he's not going to shoot down no balloon from China without talking to the Chinese to get permission. You think you want to take a war, have a war with China?
Well,
those are some of the most aggressive fighters in the world, the Chinese and the Japanese.
Didn't we just come through the word supremacy?
That's right.
So Biden feels superior to any other Chinese or African or Hispanic. Nothing rivals the supreme position.
That's what you are led to believe. The president, the senators, and others know that China and some of these other nations control America. They own all kind of land, hotels, banks, golf courses, plantations by the thousands of acres, and government bonds. If the Chinese would tell Biden, I want my money for all these bonds I got, I want it tomorrow, the United States would fall in less than 24 hours. They couldn't pay it.
Well, I think that same thing applies to the state of Mississippi.
Of course
when
it does.
goes to, if Washington, D.C. would shut off the subsidy that it sends down here, that the state would collapse in 24 hours.
No, they wouldn't let that happen. Then they would start giving people health care to keep that money coming, like they did the flag deal. You know, they got these hospitals closing. According to my information, they say here that about 38 hospitals prone to close last year, and now it's down to about 28. See, the research shows that Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, can get over $1 billion a year to cover up to 300,000 working people that's working every day that can't afford Medicare. They make $1.50 more than to qualify for health insurance. And the people in leadership say, we don't want these people to be healthy. Why should we go and help these people that we're trying to control to be healthy? We want to continue to be supreme. We want to continue to dominate them. So you got to keep them sick, let them work and make a quarter more than the minimum wage, and keep them located in their own little relocation camp right here in the inner cities until the next 7 years, and we'll have that. And then we're going to kick them out of there because they're not going to be able to buy the food in the restaurants. They're going to have more private schools and religious schools in the inner city of Jackson and other cities where blacks are in control. You will most certainly won't be able to live in the hotels. That's going to be $300 and $400 a night. Your rent going to go from 50% to 100% increase. If you have a house note, you're not going to be able to move into the urban areas where they rehab them. You're not going to live in those apartments where you can get today in the Jackson area, downtown area, $700 to $900. When they get through regentrifying the area, it's going to be $1,500 to $4,000 plus utilities to live in those homes and apartments. So where can a person that's making $35,000 to $42,000 live? They can't live in the suburbs. They can't live in the downtown area of Jackson, New York City, Detroit, and other areas because they're going to take it by force.
Can't even live in Harlem.
Of course not. Harlem been gone. Black folks don't have control of Harlem anymore. There are a few that lives there, and those few that own those big houses there, they had to sell them because they rehab those areas and say, black folks and others, you can keep your apartment, your townhouse, if you spend $3 million to meet the codes. They changed the code. They don't tell you to leave, say you got to meet the requirements. And these Caucasians always find out what you're able to do and set the requirement a little higher out of your range, economically, socially, educationally, and experience-wise.
So, Doc,
I've seen all of this happen during my time, and you know it's fact.
So you don't have to have a war to take over property and assets
Of
from
course
other
not.
people.
You don't need a war. You have so much technology now and so much expertise that you can look your enemy in the eye, smile at him, and cut his neck off tomorrow with a piece of legislation.
A piece of legislation.
That's right.
Policy.
Every time.
And that's what we have going on here in Mississippi. We're about out of time. This is Socrates Garrett and Dr. Eldridge Henderson, and we're talking about the condition of black people, and we're talking about the state and relationships in America. And the wealth gap is widening between blacks and whites. You know, there's so greater health disparities than we've seen before. Blacks were healthier in 1965 than they are now. We did not have all of the drug infestation and the high crimes. I remember when we didn't even lock our doors. We didn't have anyone breaking in our homes and things of that nature. And we didn't have anybody that was crazy. One or two people maybe didn't have all of their faculties, but for the most part, everybody was doing fairly well. We never saw anybody of a different persuasion. It's kind of hard to be of a different persuasion in terms of LBGT if you got to pick up 20 bales of hay every hour. If you got to wrestle 2 mule teams down to the ground, it's kind of hard to be anything less than a man. The requirements there was that had to be done. Work had to be done. Hauling pulpwood and cutting lumber. All of those things requires muscle and requires attitude and mentality. And when you come home, you expect that your dinner will be on the table and that your plate would be kept warm until you got there, because that was the position of the man. Dr. Henderson, we're getting ready to close out, but that's my remembrance of black history and how men were respected and how they held a rightful positions in their communities. What's yours?
My thing is, when I do a Black History speech, I have a policy. I talk about the past for 3 to 5 minutes, and the rest of my speech is on the future and solutions to those 5 areas: education and training, politics, economic development, leadership, and religion. I tell people how they can restore their self-dignity if they control those areas from birth to death in areas where they're in the majority, and all they got to do is pool their resources and stop depending on others, set up their local banks, their local insurance companies, their own hospitals. They have the money to do it, so why not do it? Create some new leaders, get rid of most of the old leaders. You can't get rid of all of them at one time, but you got to gradually train your young people to take the job at Church X, to take the job as the sheriff, the new mayor, the new city council person, the new senator, the new legislator, and then get in that entrepreneurship business, entrepreneurs, and create their own businesses. When you know anything, they have a series of drugstores, shopping centers, food stores, liquor stores, car dealerships, convention centers that's owned by churches and community organizations. So when you have a national convention, you can take your 10,000 or 30,000 people to your own facility. Have your school right there. The kids that's coming for a week from New York City can enroll in the kindergarten through high school or college right there at that center and stay up on their lessons. This can be done. And if we don't have it done by 7 years, you're going to have 100 years of relocation and demise in the black community.
This is Socrates Garrett Live. You know, Dr. Henderson spoke 3 minutes about black history, and the rest of the time he spoke about a vision for the future. We require visionary leaderships to step forward, to come forward now and make a difference and make a change in this downward spiral that we find ourselves in. We want you to join us next week on Socrates Garrett Live. Stay safe and good night. Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from